Welcome to the National Park Service's recorded webinar on applying for an Underrepresented Community Grant. This webinar will help you complete a competitive application for this program and provide some guidance on how to do that along the way. The Underrepresented Community Grant Fund program comes from the Historic Preservation Fund, and this is a national fund that Congress provides appropriations to each year. And the funding comes from offshore oil lease revenue, not tax dollars. The idea being the destruction of one resource, part of that funding should go back into the preservation of other resources. So this is how we get the Historic Preservation Fund, which funds several grant programs that are managed by the National Park Service in our Washington office by the State, Tribal, Local Plans and Grants Division. The Underrepresented Community Grant Program is designed to support the survey, inventory, and designation of historic properties that are associated with communities that are not currently represented in the National Register. So this is perhaps minority communities, rural communities, any type of property that you can make the case that is not currently represented in the National Register. Any grant project that receives funding must result in the submission of a new nomination to the National Register of Historic Places, or a National Historic Landmark nomination, or an amendment to an existing National Register nomination or NHL nomination to include that underrepresented community story that might not currently be present. As a reminder, there is no matching requirement for this program, but it can be considered as a competitive factor. The process and deadlines. This is an important part of applying for any federal grant. All applications for the National Park Service for the Historic Preservation Fund must be made through grants.gov. Paper or emailed applications will not be accepted. Do keep in mind that in order to register for grants.gov, you need to be registered in sam.gov, which is an overall financial system for the federal government and all grant programs. That registration can take up to 4 weeks, so please start the process early. We will not grant extensions for grant applications due to incomplete registrations in these systems, so this is very important. Usually the opportunity to apply for this program begins in the summer with applications due in the fall or the winter. This program has moved around a little bit, so to keep informed, simply subscribe to a saved search, and then grants.gov will update you when this program becomes available. Who can apply? States, tribes, and certified local governments are the 3 applicant groups. Certified local governments are communities, there's 2,000 across the country that have been certified as local partners in the Federal Preservation Program, and it's a partnership between the state, federal, and local level. For a list of those local governments, to determine if you are one, go to go.mps.gov/CLG lists. And this is an eligibility criteria, so we will check to make sure if you're a local government application that you are an active certified local government. If you have questions about becoming one, please contact your state historic preservation office. The minimum request is $15,000 federal share. The maximum request is $50,000. Again, no match is required. But having that local commitment to the project can enhance your application and make it more competitive. It might not be a cash match that you're providing, maybe it's in-kind resources or personnel time or that kind of thing, but showing that local commitment does help make for a stronger application. Please note that the selection panel may, at its discretion, award less than the minimum grant request. They may also make budget recommendations, or we may fund partial projects depending on the amount of funding available. This program usually has $500,000 available for it each year, and that has been the past history over the last several years. What do we not pay for? This is a program that specifically does survey and nominations. So things like construction, acquisition, maintenance, moving properties, fundraising costs, those are things that this program does not do. It's very specific what this program is able to fund. And any work performed prior to the announcement of the award, we need to approve all work as it comes in for the grant after it's awarded. The selection process. As your application comes in, Park Service personnel will screen those and make sure that you meet the minimum eligibility requirements. And then the qualified federal employees that make up the selection panel will review the completed proposal in accordance with the selection criteria that we'll talk about next. Keep in mind that that matching fund part that is not required but can be part of the evaluation process. Reviewers' applications evaluations are based solely on the material provided in the application. So if you send letters of support later or a document to support your application, they will not be considered. I encourage you to spend more time writing your application and less time garnering letters of support. Where we really want to see a letter of support is if it is a partner that's actively involved in the program, maybe providing some type of matching share, that type of thing. That's where we want to see a letter of support outlining their role in the project. Panel recommendations will be made to the Secretary of the Interior, and then the final selections and awards will be announced. The Park Service will also apply risk assessments to the projects, and that determines your financial and programmatic risk. So there may be some additional reporting requirements and that type of thing placed on you depending on your ability to manage a federal grant. Keep in mind that after the grant application process has ended, should you not receive funding, or even if you do receive funding, we are happy to provide the panel comments to you. You simply need to email us and ask for those. We'll provide you with directions for that. This is really important because a lot of applicants have to apply more than once to receive grants, and understanding those comments, making tweaks to your application to take into account those comments is important to do. So let's talk a little about the criteria that we use to select the underrepresented community grants. First is significance. This is a real important part of this is kind of the beef of the guts of the application, this defining the criteria. So we need you to describe the community and the sort of resources that this project involves, and tell us why you have determined that they are underrepresented in your jurisdiction. So that could be within your state, within your community, within your tribe. We need to know why has this type of resource not been nominated before. Tell us if they're already listed in the National Register or state, tribal, or local level designation, and if they're not listed, why they should be. Applicants that are not listed in the National Register need to consult with their state historic preservation office to make sure that they are eligible to be in the National Register, and documentation of that needs to be provided as part of the application. So that could be a determination of eligibility from the state office, either in a form or a letter, or that the sites included may have been part of a survey that was completed or approved by the state office and shows that they are clearly eligible. This is an important part, so make sure you contact your state office early to have that conversation. The second criteria is planning. So we want to know, how does this project meet the goals of your local, state, or tribal preservation plan? How does this advance the protection of historic resources within your community? Next up is feasibility, and this is where you really tell us that you as the organization is capable of handling a federal grant and completing it successfully. So talk about your timeline. We usually give you 2 to 3 years to complete these projects. Make sure that your budget justification is clear, and tell us what you're spending the funding on, and make sure that matches up with what you're describing in your application. Talk about how you're going to be able to meet the federal requirements and guidelines, and describe who's involved in the project, both on the financial side and the programmatic side. Will you be hiring a consultant? Will you be doing the project in-house? And is your staff qualified to do that? Those are all important aspects. Next up is sustainability, and this is really focusing on the impacts the project is going to have after completion. So what is this federal investment going to do to help further the preservation of this underrepresented community? So tell us about the public-private partnerships involved, community engagement that may start through the grant project but then continue after that, and how these partnerships will sustain and continue to support the resource after the grant project is complete. Maybe this is a phased project and you're first doing survey of the project, and then you're going to work on a National Register nomination as the next phase. It's fine to tell us that, but tell us the path you're planning for the project. Departmental priorities is the last criteria. The Department of Interior has a list of several secretarial priorities that are part of our strategic plan. And the two that are most closely tied to this program are creating a conservation legacy by examining land use planning process and land use designations. And so this process of doing survey and designating to the national, state, local, tribal register is an important way to meet that priority. Also restoring trust with local communities. So how is the documentation of this underrepresented community going to restore trust with that community that may have been left out of documentation projects in the past? With every grant program, we get a series of frequently asked questions. So we've included some of those here, hopefully to help you throughout your application process. First, is there a local resource for our organization to help us with our application? And yes, we would encourage you to contact your state historic preservation officer. You can see a link here to find out where that office is located if you don't already have contact with them. You definitely need to talk to them about National Register status for this program and have them on board with your project. We will be working with them on any documentation projects, especially National Register listings. So it's important that they know that the project is coming in down the pipe. Also, you might look to local universities or other nonprofits that might have experience with grant writing. It's always a good idea to have someone else take a look at your grant application to make sure it makes sense. Sometimes you're a little too close to the project and that it's clear and understandable. What is the definition of an underrepresented community? So this is a question we get quite a bit, and there really is no singular definition. It is your job as the applicant to argue for us and support why that resource and related to that community is underrepresented in the National Register of Historic Places. You may look back at previous applications. You will find examples related to women, African Americans, Asian Pacific, Islanders, Hispanics, Latinos, and LGBT resources. I would encourage you to also look at if say the tax incentive program is driving National Register listings in your state. So perhaps those are more urban focused. Maybe rural resources are underrepresented in your community. So just think about it and try to get an argument to support it. And if you have questions, feel free to contact us. This is also a good conversation to have with your state historic preservation office. Our organization would like to submit more than one application. You certainly may do that. Keep in mind that you're competing against yourself, so you might want to put your strongest application forward. And then where can you find additional program requirements? I encourage you to closely read the Notice of Funding Opportunity that's available on grants.gov as part of the application, because this will outline a lot of details and answer a lot of questions that you may have. Where can you find additional information? You can go to our website. The URL is go.nps.gov/URC. We are happy to provide application assistance in the form of answering basic questions. We do not read draft applications. And that is the State, Tribal, Local Plans and Grants Division at the Park Service. Our email is preservation_grants_info@nps.gov. And then our main phone line is listed here. There is not a human that answers the phone, but we do check our voicemail multiple times a day and return those calls as quickly as we can. If you have questions about grants.gov, the Park Service is unfortunately not the expert on grants.gov, so I encourage you to call them directly. They have a 24/7 support line and are very responsive, and also an email that you can reach out to. My name is Megan Brown. I'm the Chief of the State, Tribal, Local Plans and Grants Division, and I hope this has been a helpful webinar on how to apply for an Underrepresented Community Grant, and we look forward to seeing your application. Please let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.